Warning: this podcast features adult subject matter, adult language, and things not meant for children to hear. Viewer discretion is advised. You've been warned.
You're good.
I think we might have done it. We are live, ladies and gentlemen, on the I'm No Joe channel. Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the I'm No Joe podcast, the show where every armchair quarterback can feel like an Eddie Bravo. Tonight, as like most nights, I have my compatriot in combat sports here, my Wednesday night shenanigan cohort, the man with the plan, Mr. Galty Vapes across the octagon from me here. How you doing tonight, brother?
Doing fantastic, especially after last weekend's fucking showing. It was brilliant to watch from beginning to end.
It was. There was definitely things that we're going to be talking about this evening from last weekend that anybody who might have missed last weekend's UFC 244 show, I encourage you wholeheartedly to go back now that it's been a little bit of time and go back and rewatch it top to bottom. I've gone back and rewatched it 3 times since Saturday night. It was an absolutely spectacular event, top to bottom.
Forewarning, possible spoiler alerts.
Maybe, potentially, allegedly, nothing's confirmed. But as we like to do around here, right out of the top, we will jump into some news and recent events, some things that have happened, some fights that have been announced, some shit that has gone down since we last talked to you fine folks here. First and foremost, Jairzinho Rosenstrike, that's what it is. Gigantic beast of a man has officially been announced as of last night. He will be headlining December 7th UFC in DC card against one Alistair the Reem Overeem. Quick turnaround fight, but I don't see it being any kind of an issue for Rosenstrike. He didn't really have any damage to contend with, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But going right after Overeem and was arguably vying with Derek Lewis to see which one of the two of them was going to potentially get the hat nod, if as it were, to step in and take over for that match. Turns out we're going to see Rosenstrike under the big lights. The next one that they announced yesterday that I think is an interesting fight, definitely worth watching to see how it shakes loose. Jeff Neal versus the one and only aluminum Mike Perry himself, added to the UFC 245 card, as if there weren't enough interesting fights on that card that we'll be talking about in just a few episodes. They are now adding aluminum Mike Perry to the fray, and that always ends up with craziness. So we definitely want to keep an eye out for that one. Another thing that was announced yesterday afternoon, it kind of got just pushed through the MMA news cycle, as it were. I think it really should have gotten a lot more attention than it did. Dana White and Mick Maynard have decided, along with Sean Shelby and the other executives, they have released Thomas Gifford from the UFC following his just absolute brutal loss a couple weeks back here. They honestly just feel that the kid does not have enough experience to be on this level. And I think as much of an asshole as he was for it, Mike Davis actually helped prove that point. And I legitimately agree. I don't wish the kid, any ill will or anything, but you are clearly not on the level of playing field that is operating in the UFC right now. And I think it's actually a good thing for him, because that was a severe beating that he took, and he didn't need to. I think with a little more experience in the cage, a few more miles under his belt, he'll get a little more familiar, and things like that when he starts to get back to this level of competition, which I believe he will, won't be as much of an issue. But for now, he has officially been released, and I think, to his benefit here more than his detriment. Next thing I want to talk about real quick. the one, the only, Hoist himself, Mr. Gracie, as it were. His son, Conry Gracie, is going to get back into the octagon against a UFC and PFL alumni, one Hector Aldana, at Bellator 258 in January on the same card that Cyborg is making her premiere, fighting for the women's featherweight belt against Julia Budd, which that's going to be an interesting matchup unto itself. So they are very much stacking that Bellator card. I think it's the first Bellator card, I think their big one of the year. I think they've got one before that. I think there's one the 14th or the 15th. But that's the first big Bellator card of the year, and they are coming out swinging. They are stacking that card very, very heavily to come into 2020 with a big hoopla, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Gracies fare over in the Bellator side of the world. Neiman had a great shot, couldn't quite achieve his goal. Conry has had a mixed bag here, but like we say, is one of the more developed, one of the more total package, well-rounded of the Gracies of this generation. So be interesting to see how he fares when he gets back after it. Also, another announcement coming from the Bellator side of the aisle, as it were. The War Master himself, Josh Barnett, makes his UFC debut against Ronnie Marks. December 20th, the Bellator USO show. That is going to be insane. Josh Barnett, while I will openly admit, is definitely on the back side, the back nine, as it were, of his career, is one of the few gentlemen out there who may be on the back nine of their career, but still looks like he is on the front nine of the career. I would very much liken him to a lighter skinned Yoel Romero with more hair, maybe. Large gentleman, great genetics, amazing physical stature, and now completely exonerated by USADA, the first ever athlete to be suspended by USADA for a supplement violation, have the supplements tested, and then be exonerated to prove that his samples that were tested were non-exogenous. He did not take anything that contested his ability to compete and was exonerated for it. The first one with an exoneration. But he's a giant of a fucking man. And he's getting back in there against another giant of a man in Ronnie Marks. So the USO show that Bellator is putting on December 20th is definitely going to be an early Christmas present to those of us hardcore MMA fans. Let's see. One more thing I do want to talk about here before we do a little bit of recap from UFC 244 at Madison Square Garden. A little bit more somber news, a little bit more serious. This story both made big headlines and didn't, and again got kind of flushed right through the MMA news cycle since it moves so rapidly these days. And this story, I feel, deserves more time in this show than anything else that we are going to talk about tonight, including the card that we're doing this show for. What I'm talking about is Hudson Caliocane. He is the Titan FC welterweight champion. Well, he was up until this past weekend. Hudson was sanctioned by Titan FC to take a exhibition match down in Brazil. Took the match, went down to Brazil, fought a hard fight, lost the fight by decision. In the locker room after the fight, said that he didn't feel right and then collapsed and was taken to the hospital. Turns out he had a brain stem hemorrhage. The entire left side of his body is completely paralyzed right now. He is stabilized. His condition is not worsening, but there is no telling at this point if he will recover at all. And if he does, to what extent he will be able to recover. First and foremost, I want to take a moment to wish Mr. Caliocane all the best and a speedy recovery. My thoughts are absolutely with him and his family. That is absolute travesty to happen. Now, the reason we're talking about this story is because he didn't just get a random brain hemorrhage during the fight. Hudson got the brain hemorrhage because he is a welterweight fighter that shouldn't be a welterweight fighter. And we talk about this all the time. And this is one of those tragic situations where the thing that we always harp about finally fucking happens. And now, sadly, we have to see the repercussions and hope that the people in a position of power to affect this make some fucking changes so we don't see something like this happen again, or God forbid, something worse, because the next step from this is death. Someone will die in the ring. That's how it goes from here. Mr. Caliocane almost died. The base of his skull, or the base of his brain rather, hemorrhaged in his skull. This happened because he cut too much weight too fast. They didn't weigh him before he started the weight cut exactly, which is another questionable practice unto itself. People close to him say that he was cutting in excess of 35 pounds within the last 9 days. That's one, too short of a period to be cutting big weight. Two, way too much fucking weight to be cutting to fight, period. That's too much fucking weight. You're cutting essentially 2 full fucking weight classes, putting yourself 3 down from where you're walking at. And that's assuming that the 35-ish pounds, allegedly, were what he actually cut from. And that's not just what they were saying the last time they checked, not what he actually walked around at. This is one of those situations, as much of a combat sports fan as I am, as much of a combat fan as TJ is, as much as LUMI is, as much as any of us are, this is not what we want to see. This isn't why we watch the fucking sport. This is the kind of thing that makes it to where we can't tell our friends about the thing that we enjoy because someone involved in it has done something so ill-conceived, so misinformed for the best intentions that they literally have jeopardized their own life just unimaginably more than it ever would have needed to be, in the fact that they're already fighting for a fucking living. This is not just cutting down a couple pounds because I weigh 183 and I don't want to fight at 185, so I'll fight at 170. This is a gentleman who was walking around in excess of 210 pounds, cutting down to fight at 170, and it detrimented his body so bad that the blows he suffered during that fight tried to snap his brain away from the rest of his spinal column. This is enough. Something has to fucking change. We have to have some type of universal rule set where you can't be allowed to cut that much fucking weight. I understand to a certain degree, weight cutting will never be completely eliminated because there will always be a way to negotiate a couple of pounds here and there, and it will always add up to at least a minuscule difference. But situations like this can easily be avoided with regular weight checks and hydration checks. If you look at other organizations, specifically 1FC, with the hydration tests that they do, with the regular out of competition weight checks that they do, they know the status of the athletes year round when they're competing and when they're not. So they know what the actual weight of the fighter is, regardless of the competition, and make sure they don't venture too far from that weight in a healthy manner. California has started to issue hydration rating testings and fines for coming in overhydrated on fight day to help combat weight cutting. And I think something of this nature at this point has to be universally implemented. We're at a point now where someone's going to die. We have come literally as close as we fucking can to that point. The next step is that someone is actually going to die from cutting fucking weight to step into a cage and fight for their lives. The fight enough is entertainment. We have to have some type of governing rule set, some type of body that makes sure universally this doesn't get to that point. And I'm going to get back and we're going to do some 244 talks, but This is a situation. I love combat sports. I love MMA. I love all branches of martial arts. It gets to my core. It gets to the Neanderthal in me. It makes the caveman in my brain say, yes, smash. But I also appreciate the intellectual aspect of it, the mental chess that's required, performed through the body, that is fighting. I don't enjoy watching idiots make that look bad. It's already hard enough to explain to most people that you are a fan and encourage fighting in a modern day and age. Things like this just completely erasing the fact, negating the fact of what this young man and now his family have to go through in hopes of recovery and getting back to any semblance of what an actual normal life is going to be. Because aside from his health, his ability to provide financially for himself and his family has now been removed with this as well. So we have to do something here. At some point, something has to change. I want to get back to talking about, 244 recap here, but this affects me very seriously, and I don't want to glance over it. I feel that this deserves more time than anything else we'll talk about today.
I think the thing that bothers me most is these guys are supposed to be fighting for a living, not fighting to be living. Because at this point, that's what's happened. When something like that happens, you're no longer fighting for a living. You're fighting to be living. Look, we get it. For us, it's entertainment. I love it. I enjoy watching. Like you said, the caveman in me, thud, pound, smash, comes out when I'm watching it. In fact, there's some times when I'm sitting on the couch, the missus going, why are you jumping when they're swinging? Because it gets me that hyped.
Yep.
But we've been saying this over and over and over and over and over and over and over fucking again. We're literally beating the dead horse here. They need to stop cutting so much goddamn weight. There's a point where, yes, when you're young, you can manage to safely cut 30 pounds over the course of your 12-week camp. Not in the last week. If you're doing it over the course of 6 months or 3 months, whatever, for your training camp, 4 months, let's say it's a 4-month camp. You got a 4-month camp? Yeah, you can safely cut 30 pounds under proper diet, nutrition.
Right, yeah, with a nutritionist and a health management system in place.
That's safe, but going in that last week and then dropping that much, you're just literally letting your body wither away for a week just to make weight. At that point, that's not worth it. There's got to be a system in play that checks them X number of days out, X number of weeks out to see where they're at in comparison to what they need to weigh. Look, if you say you want to fight 170, you walk around at 205 and you want to drop that 35 pounds, that's fine. Weigh you at the start of your camp, and as you're going through, you should progressively be losing that weight over the course of your camp, not in the last week. In fact, I really wish that they would put a percentage on this. Not a specific number, because you can't set a specific number, especially for smaller weight class guys, because, somebody who wants to go from 150 to 125, they can drop 25 pounds, but that's way more of a percentage at 150 to 125 than it is from, let's say, 205 to 185. That's a hell of a lot smaller number there. They need to put a percentage that says you can only lose X percentage of your body weight in order to make weight. And that is that you're out of competition weight, not a
fight week weight.
Not a fight weight, no. Or not a training camp weight. What are you walking around at when you're eating pretzels and fucking donuts and training every day?
Right.
Versus you're on nutrition and training every day. There's got to be some sort of set standard. To be honest, I would like to see it no more than 15% of the body weight, because 20% I think is entirely too much. 10 might be a little small. The only exception to policy on that I would have, your heavyweights. Most of your heavyweights are abnormally out of shape. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because they're still in fighting shape.
Right.
But those guys, you can see some of them walking around at 300 pounds and drop to 265 with ease.
There's some of them that openly admit that they walk around at 325 and cut to 265 to make the heavyweight limit.
Yeah, and some of those guys, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe it's the thing that they need to put a set percentage per each weight class, adjust it to the weight class. Like
I both agree and disagree with that. I agree with the 15%. I think that's part of the reason why California uses that. That's the California State Athletic Commission's benchmark. It's 15% of total body weight cannot be gained between weigh-in and fight day. That's your threshold.
Yeah, and that's strictly for their water weight test.
And I agree. I think overall, not a bad number. On the heavyweight side of it, though, I agree a lot with the likes of the Joe Rogans in this particular situation. I think if you're so emphatic about having a heavyweight class, about having big men fight, but you're worried about weight cutting, have your heavyweight set at 265 and then have an open weight.
Yeah, like anything.
If you want to weigh 295, but you're cut at 295 because you're 6'8", but you don't want to have to cut weight to meet that 265 heavyweight limit, I think you should absolutely be able to fight some dude who's 300 pounds and just doesn't want to cut weight, period.
Yeah, and I would have no problem with that at all. Like a super heavyweight division.
Exactly.
To be honest, that wouldn't be a bad thing, but I think they do really need to limit it to a 15% across the board for the most part. I mean, that gets a little dicey as you get down to the lighter weights because 15% is a lot of fucking playroom when you get to like your 125ers.
When you start talking about your flyweights and your atom weights and shit.
Yeah, and that's where I said maybe they need to adjust it to weight class size because, like, look, 10% of 125, that's 12 pounds.
Right.
So you figure that means, let's just say they can weigh up to 137. At that point, they could be fighting the 135 division.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's why I said it's kind of a little bit of a gray area there. I know there's no science to this, and I'm just winging shit off the wall here,
But compared to what we're dealing with now, I think 15% would be very fucking reasonable to work
with and you gotta
for a starting point.
Even look at guys like, let's say, Conor McGregor. He went down to, 135?
I think he fought 135 a couple times, but he mainly was at 145.
And then went to 145. He fought at 150, 155, and then he fought twice at 170.
172, yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are guys that can do it, but if you notice, most of those guys who started those really lightweights, as they get older, they realize, hey, I shouldn't be cutting this much, and they go up to a weight class that's more natural for them. Now, there's some other idiots that are out there, a la the Luke Rockholds and things of that nature, who had been literally beating their bodies off, trying to make a lower weight class so they didn't have to fight at a more powerful division. Look, I get that. You don't want to get hit as hard. Look, I understand that portion of it. But you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. You shouldn't be cutting that much goddamn weight. That's all I'm saying.
Yep, I agree completely. But this is one of those things. Like, this is one of the defining factors that makes, I think, fans almost more infuriated than fighters in this situation, because the average fighter doesn't mind weight cutting. They understand that it's part of the game, and I use air quotes very strongly in that situation. But the average fan who's never been in a fight, who's never trained for a fight, who's never been in part of a competitive situation like that where it requires weight cutting and disciplined weight cutting like that, doesn't necessarily understand per se the same importance or the same involvement, the toll it takes on a body, the task of actually cutting that much weight and the impacts that it can have. But at the same time, the very vocal majority of us that do understand that type of thing also understand the impact that it would have if we stop that type of bullshit, since we're watching fighting for entertainment.
Well, and we talked about it last week, about that boxer kicking the bucket after his fight.
Yep.
I said it outright. I was like, look, it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when this happened in mixed martial arts. Look, it's combat sports. It's bound to happen. It happens in every combat sport. Somebody eventually dies from injuries suffered while fighting. This overstrenuous weight cut, though, that makes you exponentially more culpable to it, to where you do have a better possibility of dying from injury suffered. All on what we're seeing right now. It's just something they do need to fix sooner rather than later. Maybe this is a wake-up call for some people. I'm guessing, as much as I hate to say this, though, it's not going to be.
No. And that's one of the reasons why, even though we're just a little show on the internet and it's just a couple of guys talking with a gal who gives a casual opinion, I wanted to take time because it legitimately is that important to me as a fan to make my opinion known on a situation like this. Anybody who follows me on any of my other social media platforms, for any of the other many things that the meter does, you understand I'm not one to hold my tongue, and I'm generally pretty bold about my opinions because I don't take other people's consideration or other people's feelings into consideration per se when I give my opinion, because I'm not giving my opinion for you to feel. I'm giving you my opinion so you understand why I speak about these things the way that I speak about them, because this impacts me on a personal level. This impacts the way that I feel about a thing that I love this deeply, that I'm willing to take time out of my life to tell other people how fucking important that this is. That's why I wanted to go on about this situation and about the detriment of this type of weight cutting bullshit to begin with. And I realize that we're just a little show, but this is a serious issue as well. So that being said, we'll take a step back from Somberville. We'll jump into some little recap section here. Give a quick little rundown from last week's UFC 244. Again, just like we did, we're not going to go through everything piece by piece, but there are definitely some things that need to be mentioned for those who don't feel like going back and watching and just want to hear the good stuff that they missed. So starting right out at the very fucking tippity top, Hakeem Dawodu versus Julio Arce was an absolute fucking war back and forth. Arguably could have gone either way, come to the end. Just a hell of a fucking battle and a great example of guys that want to get after it for the whole fucking fight regardless. The next fight, not quite how we thought it would go to that extent, but it was a little obvious the way that it was looking, and it kind of went that way. Lyman Good versus Mr. Rencounter. It was an absolute fucking one-sided slobber knocker. We knew that Lyman Good was strong and that he was going to be a problem, but we really, at least I really thought that the Rencounter wrestling and grappling aspect of it was going to have a lot more impact on that fight, and it absolutely did not. Lyman Good gave zero fucks about anything that Mr. Rencounter was trying to throw at him, stopped every wrestling attempt, and just beat the absolute shit out of him. Lyman Good looked like a fucking stud last weekend, and I think legitimately he needs a real challenge now. I think at this point he has absolutely demonstrated that he is a bad motherfucker, and he needs somebody to step up and really give him a challenge, because the dude is strong, the dude has got a gas tank, and he's smart in the fucking ring. So it was a hell of a fight, and he showed us exactly why he needs better challengers here, and I think he's going to get it after this one. Next, we will talk about the ironic one and only ladies fight on the card last weekend. Caitlin Chookagian versus Jennifer Maia. Jennifer Maia actually missing weight by nearly 3 pounds, even with the hoop of shame. One of the first times that I and the commentators for the weigh-ins themselves actually had ever seen a situation where someone's clothes didn't have any weight to them. She stepped on the scale and she was 128.2, I believe. She called for the hoop of shame. They brought it out. They brought it up. She set her clothes down to the side, stepped back on the scale, hands up, no touching the hoop of shame, 128.2. Zero difference, naked versus with clothes. But missed weight nonetheless. The fight, as we discussed on last week's episode, went pretty much exactly how we thought it was going to. Jennifer Maia, despite the weight issues, is a fairly aptly ranked number 5. And against the legitimate, in my opinion, number 1 contender, the fight went exactly how MMA math dictated that it was most likely going to go. The number 1 fighter pretty much ragdolled the number 5 fighter despite some decent opposition, and ended up coming out with the win, and then proceeded to make remarks about how she's next for the title fight, but they don't want to give her that fight. So we knew that's exactly how that was going to go, and it pretty much followed script to a fucking T. It was still an interesting fight, definitely a good fight to take into consideration if you're looking at Chookagian as a potential next title contender, and I absolutely am. So building her case against Valentina, you absolutely need to take a fight like that into consideration and look at what she is capable of, because she did shine a little bit there.
She did, but for me, not enough to warrant a title shot. I think she needs one more against the top
big
2 or 3 person there, because without that and showing how she can shine against one of them, I can't take it. Because to be honest, Maya put up way more fight than a number 1 versus 5 should have. Especially
I agree.
somebody who missed weight, because obviously she was fucking gassed and couldn't make weight. So.
Well, and you would assume in a situation combined with your competitor not making weight, you being the legitimate number 1 competitor versus, or contender rather, versus a fairly aptly ranked number 5-ish, middle of the top of the pack contender, you would think that there would be a more of a noticeable level in performance against her. And realistically, even though Chookagian won, you kind of expected her to really just like put the pace on and just like inflict some damage, impose her will, get this fight in and out, and be done with it in a fairly dominant fashion to show why you're the number 1. And she really didn't do that.
I think what I was most surprised about with Chookagian's actual performance itself, she knew her opponent missed weight, which means she knew she wasn't feeling hot, because when you miss weight and you can't cut 2 extra pounds to make the limit of 1 pound over, that tells you something right there. That is a good reason to go into just full fucking slaughter mode and outpace the fuck out of her the entire fight.
Run them ragged, because they can't
make her get on her fucking bicycle, tire her out by the end of the second, and then beginning of the third, put her away.
Yep, absolutely. And she couldn't do that. And the fact that she couldn't do that to number 5, and we've seen what Valentina can do to the best of the best, sweetheart, I don't think you're ready.
Yeah, nope. Not by any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, I really don't see her being any way ready for Valentina. But at the same time, we have seen in several situations, be it an Anthony Smith, be it an Alexander Gustafsson, be it a Tyrone Woodley, sometimes you don't think you can be beaten until you step up to someone who is just abso-fucking-lutely beats you. And as much as I don't want to incite undue injuries on people, maybe Caitlin Chookagian really needs to step in and see exactly what Valentina is capable of firsthand before she really herself understands the difference in the level of her performance versus the Bullet's performance. But we'll see how that shakes loose. The next fight I want to talk about here, this is kind of what I hinted towards a little bit earlier when we were talking about news and recent events. Mr. Andre the Pitbull Arlovsky versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik absolutely melted him. Just flat out 3 punches and it was over. He touched him with a left jab early on, and it literally, like Mike Tyson's punch out, 4-step wobbled Arlovsky backwards. And immediately you could see that the eyes were there, but they were not focused. And he was already right away on jello. And then doom, fucking doom, came in, rained down, and just good night, Gracie. It's fucking over. Sleepy time for Andre. I am 100% firm in my belief that Mr. Rozenstruik has absolutely earned his 9-0 status here. I don't believe there is any soup can complaints that can be made about this gentleman's record, which is absolutely why I was 100% okay with him taking that short notice fight against Overeem for the December card headline. I think with 0 damage that he took in that fight and still being in good shape, he basically just has to extend his fight camp and stay in semi-reasonable good shape between now and the end of next month. That should not be difficult for that man to do. And with the performances we have seen out of this man coming up to this point, I think he absolutely stands a very good chance of doing to Overeem what he just did to Arlovsky. Maybe not quite as fast, maybe not quite as cleanly, but I think he definitely has a chance to do the same thing to the Reem. The problem is on the other side of that, you've got a pit bull who needs to be taken to that farm upstate and let run free with the other MMA fighters. It's time. It is absolutely time. And I get that he was on a fairly decent head of steam there for a minute. And as an older guy trying to make a resurgence back into limelight in gold contention, you don't want to bow out, especially when you think you've still got it. But at this point, Rosenstruik is a very, very good, in my opinion, representation of the new up-and-coming generation of heavyweights, and it's only going to be downhill from this point. Because as much as I like Mr. Rosenstruik here, he is still fairly low on the totem pole as far as heavyweights go. And if you've already fallen that far down that the relatively unknown gentlemen are just ragdolling you and making mincemeat out of you, it's time. It's fucking time. I think Andre needs to just transition gracefully into a different phase of his career.
Yep, that was the one and only thing I got out of that fight. Other than, well, Arlovsky needs to hang them up. He got his fucking clock cleaned again because
real smooth, yeah.
Diminishing returns on the chin. We've been saying it and we've been saying it. Look,
yep.
You were on a tear, but that's because nobody had touched your chin lately. He got his chin touched, and I truly wish only the best for him. He's a legend of the sport. Period.
Absolutely.
But it's time. Lay him down. Go train people, as we're always saying. But send that dog out to pasture. Call it a day. Look. You got plenty of things you can be doing. There's plenty of other fighters that have retired and will show you the way. You've got a big enough following that you can do just about anything right now. So hang them up. Sorry for your loss, but you had a hell of a fucking career. It's just enough to say be done, because at this point, there's no point in sitting there and watching anymore. I don't even get excited with the thought of him having another fight in the UFC.
No, I really genuinely don't. And the bad thing is that even if he does get another fight in the UFC, realistically, who is there for him that would accept a fight against him other than an up-and-comer trying to make a name off of him? Nobody of rank is going to fight Andre Arlovsky anymore. He's fallen that far out of status. His only real chance is to fight nobodies and up-and-comers.
Yep.
At that point,
play gatekeeper.
At that point, is it really worth it? Are you going to accept being the gatekeeper? Because that's the exact position you put yourself in. You bow out gracefully, dude. Bow out gracefully. I get that it's not easy, but sometimes bowing out is easier than getting carried
out. On a stretcher. or in a worse. Body bag.
Yeah, or worse, exactly. Next fight that we'll move us along to. Edward Shabazian versus Brad Tavares. That's right. Full-fledged. Brad Tavares is officially a fucking soup can. That's it. It's over. It's done. I'm making the claim. I'm staking it right now. Right here. Cream of mush. Brad Tavares is a fucking soup can. Cut him loose. I'm tired of it. I get it. Again. I get it. But, like we mentioned last week, now at least 4 of the top title contenders or champions in the division have made absolute light work out of you. And now another young up-and-comer, just very similar to the fight we just talked about, an up-and-comer in Edmund Shabazian just made light work of you. And it was pretty fucking efficient. It was pretty fucking clean. it's time to see Mr. Tavares either cut loose or retired. You're just not on the level anymore. Now, with this one on the other side of it, I think Mr. Shabazian has some potential. His problem is that he needs to run away from his head coach at full speed like he's glowing green nuclear radioactive waste. Edmund is one of the single worst, and I use this term loosely, coaches in the entire field of MMA internationally, from what I can tell. He has zero ability to teach a fighter, to grow a fighter, to help a fighter become properly prepared for their next match. And he has demonstrated that several painful times in a row. So hopefully this young man will get the fuck away from that cancer and get himself to a position to where he can really get his name out there and get a little more shine, like I think he absolutely should be. Now, that being said, that will bring us to the battle of the giant little guys, as it were, that we talked about last week. Shane Burgos versus Marquand Amir Khani. That was a fucking epic battle. That was absolutely fucking fireworks right out of the damn gate. Shane Burgos is a absolutely fucking monstrous 145-pound fighter. Marquand is not small. He's a tall, longer guy, even for 145. Shane Burgos made him look absolutely string bean small. And the power that he put on, as well as the fight IQ that he demonstrated, was just absolutely fucking admirable here. It was an absolute spectacular match, and I think Mr. Burgos as well needs some legitimate competition. He needs somebody to really challenge him, because at 145, I don't think he's ready to make that big jump up to the top yet, but he's definitely not a bottom of the pack type of gentleman. I think he needs somebody in the 10 or up range to get a good even match and a good par to see where his skill set really does stack up. But I think that guy has got an absolutely bright future. The next fight. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll say, yeah, he does. The last couple performances he's had, let him go to town. Put him up against a little stiffer competition and see what happens.
You know, as strange as it may seem, my immediate thought would be Shane Burgos versus Jeremy Stephens. Both of those dudes are big 45ers. They are both fucking power strikers, and neither one of them are going to quit. I think that would be an interesting little fucking Rock'em Sock'em Robots match between those two.
That would be fantastic.
Neither one of them really have a whole lot to lose. They're both real similar stylistically. They're real similar size-wise. They both have that I'll fucking kill you, you better knock me out mentality. That could be an interesting little matchup. But the next one we'll move along to real quick here. Point blank, plain and simple, Corey Anderson absolutely derailed the Johnny Walker hype train. Now, that's not to say that Johnny Walker won't be back. I absolutely believe that one of the first things that he tweeted out after the fight was, I didn't lose, I learned. He learned exactly the difference in the level he's on versus the level he's going up against, and the work that he has to put in going forward if he still thinks that he's going to be able to get the belt, which he does. So now we get to see, how does Johnny Walker come back from a bad break beating that he got put onto him by Corey fucking Anderson. The other side of that, though, I don't know, one, if Corey Anderson can maintain his composure enough to actually make an intelligent attempt to call out for a real title shot. Two, I don't know that Corey Anderson really has the skill sets, as much as I don't like him, to be able to shut John Jones down. Because as much of a clown as John Jones looked in that Santos fight, really trying to pretend he could only fucking fight him on the feet to keep it in his world or whatever fucking bullshit excuses John's using for that performance now. Corey didn't put that type of performance on a guy with a lot of miles, a lot of experience in UFC. He put that on Johnny Walker, who's got 4 fights in the fucking UFC. Now, I understand Johnny Walker's got experience outside the UFC, but that's not what we're talking about. Corey Anderson has been there and done that and understands these type of fights. Johnny Walker had no idea what he was walking into, and Corey made that very fucking clear. But would Corey do that to a John Jones? I don't know.
I doubt it very fucking highly. Look, there was a hell of a hype train on Johnny Walker. And admittedly so. He looked fucking fabulous in his first couple outings in the UFC. However, he wasn't fighting top contenders at that point. And to be honest, it's probably the best thing in the world for him to have lost this fight in the UFC. Purely to see, one, how he's going to react to that. Is he going to get better and realize, hey, I need to step my game up and not just run my fucking mouth all the time? On the other side here, Anderson, he talks a lot of fucking shit all the goddamn time. Give me my respect. Dude, you don't get respect from beating somebody with a hype train. Don't get me wrong. It's an impressive hype train behind Johnny Walker because he was doing some great things and making people look fucking silly.
Yep.
But at the same time, he was not a top contender. He was still on that lower echelon of fighters because he hasn't progressed his way up. Now when they throw him up against somebody who's ranked, what? Corey Anderson was ranked, what, number 8? Or
8, I believe, yeah. 8,
yeah.
I think.
And you're going to call for a title shot after that? Look, no, you can't call for a title shot after beating a fucking, what was he ranked? I
think Walker was 11.
11th or 12th or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't call for a title shot after beating somebody at the bottom of the rankings. And that, because, look, it doesn't, that fight didn't hurt either one of them the way that it went out.
Right.
Well, it hurt Anderson more than it hurt Walker.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe a little more on Corey than it did Johnny for getting beat.
But you can't call out for a title shot on that after, no, dude.
Well,
look,
that and the other big bad part of that is if it's been said millions of times before, and it will be said millions of times more, even if people like Corey Anderson don't listen to it. If you have to say, I need respect, you're not earning that respect. You don't get respect by saying, respect me. You get respect by doing the thing that gets you the respect that you want. And it is earned, not given.
Yep. And I think that's his biggest problem right there is he thinks it's a mandatory because he's won fights in the UFC. No, that's not fucking mandatory.
Lots of guys win fights in the UFC and spend their whole career doing so and never see the top 5 of a fucking ranking chart. That's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. You want to go up, you fucking earn that shit. Put on the performance.
I would have had no problem with him calling out number 3, number 4, number 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would have been an absolutely perfect call out after that fight. Absolutely perfect. No, to try to jump ship on those other guys who have a way more legitimate reason of fucking fighting ahead of you. Fuck, I will put Santos in there with his fucked up knee before I'll put him in there with
you. Well, and to be fair, what I kind of expected and what I think would have actually probably worked better for Corey Anderson in that situation would have been to call out Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes is calling out John Jones, and he himself, while has won a couple fights as well, hasn't necessarily done it against the level of competition or in a devastating enough fashion to really warrant the title shot that he's vying for either. So call out the other guy who's trying to get the thing that you're trying to get. Make them see that one of you deserve that, and it should be you. Go put that fucking performance on against the other guy you're vying against for that spot. Call out the guy going for that. Don't call out number 1 when you're a number 8 and you barely beat a hype train.
Yeah, I think the worst part of it is for me is Anderson has been bitching and bitching and bitching for
constantly.
And it hasn't just been this fight. It's been previous fights and fights before that and fights before that. He walked in, acting like he was the fucking goddamn peacock's feathers. No, dude, that's not how this works. Look, you might have been that albino peacock that didn't have all the colors. You have to earn your colors. You have to earn your fucking stripes. That's how that fucking works, dude. Don't bitch and expect shit. No, go in there and prove why you deserve the respect. Prove why you deserve a title shot. Go beat somebody who is in the top 5. Call a top 5 round. Call fucking Reyes out. To be honest, I think that's a fantastic fight between the two of those two fuckers because they both like to bitch a lot.
Exactly. They're both big mouths. They're both vying for a title shot. Neither one really deserve it. You want it? Fucking show them. Show them you want it. What do I know, though? I'm just an armchair quarterback.
That's it. I mean, not like, and besides, bitching like that, the way that they're doing it, Dana White always turns that shit down. Look,
almost every time.
History. Look at history. Almost every goddamn time that's going to happen. Unless you are one of his contender series fighters, then he's going to suck your fucking dick off and put you wherever you want to go.
Very true.
As long as you're winning.
Very true.
But, you know, neither one of those two guys are that, so.
No. But moving along from there, the next match, I have to say, I'm both impressed and unimpressed at the same time by this fight. I'm talking about Kevin Lee versus Gregor Gillespie. On one hand, I am not impressed that Gregor Gillespie went in overconfident and got his ass whipped. Not that that's his MO, but going in overconfident against an opponent more often than not, specifically lately, has led to a severe case of getting that ass whipped-itis. Gregor Gillespie just happened to have caught himself a fucking case this weekend. What I am impressed with on the other side of that, though, is what Firas Zahabi was able to do with Kevin Lee. Because Kevin Lee didn't show us any one or two things that he hasn't done before. What he showed us was his ability to put him together and listen to his corner as he put shit together. And it worked in a beautiful fucking succession, that led to Gregor Gillespie dropping down the fucking cage like it was a fucking slide on a playground. And, you know, rightfully so. It's never been a question of Kevin Lee can or can't he. It's just, why isn't he? Kevin Lee is Kevin Lee's biggest fucking enemy. He can't get out of his own head. He's either thinking he's too good or he's not fucking thinking. And however he did it, Firas Zahabi put those fucking gears back into the right way and got that machine turning again.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Firas Zahabi on this one. That dude, he put it together. Look,
he's a fucking wizard, man.
I have been a anti-Kevin Lee person for quite a while now because of the way he ran his mouth for so goddamn long, and he wasn't doing shit. Firas Zahabi and him, they did a fantastic thing. They studied a lot of fucking tapes of Gillespie fighting because they noticed something, which was he likes to dip to the right when he is ducking and weaving. Thus the one and then the head kick behind it because he knew where it was coming. They did their fucking homework, and you know what? That was not Kevin Lee before. Kevin Lee's former fucking coaches, they weren't doing that and noticing those things. Firas Zahabi went in there with a game plan. Kevin Lee stuck to that game plan and walked out with a fucking phenomenal finish. And you know what? As much as I dislike Kevin Lee because the way he's been running his mouth forever, I have nothing but nice words to say for him on this one because that was fucking beautiful. And don't get me wrong, the dude had a really bad 2019. Really fucking bad. He was getting...
Yeah. Did he freeze or did I freeze?
He's frozen.
Okay. Starting to get anxiety there for a minute. I didn't know if I froze or he froze. try to give him a chance here. It was something. Sounds like 2 words. First word. Give me something here, DJ. Okay. So, I mean, I agree completely. Derek Lee was having a pretty shitty 2019. And I think very much the single thing that has at least put a potential of turnaround on that shitty spiral that he was in is Farasa Hobby and moving up to BC and training exclusively at TriStar with GSP and Farasa Hobby. That is, in my opinion, and in many folks' opinions, one of, if not the best MMA training center outside of course, the UFC Performance Institutes, which are a whole other little weird thing. But as far as legitimate like gyms and training centers for combat sports and predominant MMA fighters go, excuse me, TriStar and Farasa Hobby is just the pinnacle fucking peak. And the work that they've done with Kevin Lee, I think, is a shining example of that. Moving along from there, unless TJ makes it back in and gets that reworked through. But moving along from there, Derek Lewis versus Blagoy Ivanov. Holy shit. We got to see in that match both Derek Lewis having an arm made out of fucking rubber, which he says he trains with guys who try and put him in arm locks and arm bars and kimuras and shit like that all the time. But we got to see him legitimately tested. His arm was bent to a cringingly painful looking degree, and he didn't even flinch. And then we also got to see a Derek Lewis going 3 hard fucking rounds and not gassing out, not in the least bit. Yeah, it looks like TJ's having some internet issues. But we got to see Derek Lewis go 3 hard fucking rounds and not gas out in the slightest. Granted, he's not bouncy 205er where he's, charging and dancing and kicking and running and being, super feisty for 3 hard rounds, but he's a heavyweight that doesn't stop and can get you at any point in 3 full hard fucking rounds. So props both to Mr. Ivanov, who had Derek Lewis legitimately in trouble a couple times, and both to Derek Lewis, who on this new path that he is walking is still at 265, but legitimately in noticeably better shape, not worn out, having energy to keep competing, and not just being the sometimes weathered Derek Lewis that we have seen in the past. Now, moving along from there, holy shit. Vincente Luque is an absolute fucking warrior. That dude is made of fucking granite. Wonder Boy hit him with everything he fucking could, literally broke both of his hands and could not stop Vincente Luque. Holy shit. And it was not a one-sided battle at any stretch of the imagination. They were given and taken on both sides of there. Wonder Boy got clipped with a couple of great fucking combinations, and he hit Vincente Luque with just about every fucking tool he had and never even slowed the man down. So on one hand, fucking mad respect to the dude Vincente Luque. That kid, with a little bit fucking polishing, is going to be an absolute fucking world breaker. On the other hand, I think Wonder Boy has kind of relegated himself to the position of gatekeeper as well. And not that he's full gatekeeper. I think he is in one of these situations that we like to refer to as a top gatekeeper, whereas I wouldn't say he's a number 15 guy, but he's definitely not a number 3 guy either. I think Wonder Boy is going to firmly affix himself somewhere around the number 5 position in the welterweight division, and I think he's going to stay there. And I know that he said that he was hoping to call out the winner of Masvidal versus Diaz, but considering I don't think I don't think. Let me rephrase that. Masvidal and Wonder Boy fought in MSG literally almost 2 years to the date that Masvidal just beat Diaz here. That Masvidal, on the other hand, was not the Masvidal that we're seeing today. This is one of those situations that we talk about sometimes where that guy's not this guy. In the last 2 years, it's not that he has changed completely, but he has changed completely, if that makes sense. Jorge Masvidal has gone from a guy who would go in there and fight to a guy who is going in there to win. And that has happened in the last 12 to 18 months or so. He took almost a year off. He took like 8 months off after that Wonder Boy fight. And that was literally the developing of the new Jorge Masvidal that we see now, that we saw put the work in against Diaz, that we'll talk about in a minute. But I don't think Wonder Boy would match up now nearly as well as he matched up 2 years ago with Jorge Masvidal, specifically because of the difference that Jorge has made versus the not as much different lack of differentiation from Wonder Boy, if that makes any sense. Wonder Boy is basically the same fucking guy now that we saw when he first started sideways hopping into the UFC. It's just a competition that's really different. Whereas Masvidal still does some of the same things we saw when Wonder Boy and he fought, but for the most part is on a completely different level and a completely different path. So I think that would be a bad move for Wonder Boy to have even tried to call it out. Luque, on the other hand, I think is actually still legitimately rising despite losing to Wonder Boy, because it wasn't a got your ass kicked loss. It wasn't a knockout loss. It wasn't a devastating got worked. He actually showed incredible tenacity in taking the amount of punishment and withstanding and rising through the amount of punishment that Wonder Boy was able to throw at him, in my opinion. Welcome back.
Yeah. Internet. Gotta love it.
What are you going to do?
Fuck. I don't even know where I cut out at, and I'm not going to go back to it because at this point I was saying my piece and I realized, wait a minute.
Kevin Lee had a terrible 2019.
Yeah, that's where we left off at, yeah. I'm thinking where I was finishing that off was, yeah, probably a good thing he won that. Otherwise, they may have cut him. But
I agree.
Yeah. On to topic now where we're at. I have a little bit different outlook on this. I really thought Vicente Luque was going to win this fight. I really did. But watching the way Wonder Boy picked him apart, don't get me wrong, Vicente did put up a good fight. It's not that he didn't get his licks in. He did, but not to the extent that you would have expected somebody of his caliber to do so.
Yeah, I can see
To
that.
be honest, I think Wonder Boy looked a lot better. It's not that his style changed that much, but his timing was fucking on point.
I will say this, though. Have you seen the two of them since the fight?
Oh, yeah. Seen the both of them since the fight.
Vicente Luque is about back to normal. Wonder Boy's face is a little puffy, and it looks like he's wearing Incredible Hulk gloves. He blew both of his fucking hands up in that fight.
And he said it, too, though. He said, I've messed my hands up. I need to take some time to recover.
Yep.
Look, dude, you get it. That's part of the fight game. You're gonna injure your hands. Your face is gonna look puffy. You're gonna get your licks in, but he looked a lot better than he had in his last couple outings. Is what I'm saying. A lot.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
But I'm disappointed in the way Luque performed. I really am. I thought he would have put up a hell of a lot better of a fight than what he did.
He did seem a little off.
And it could have been just that Wonder Boy was having a much better night than Luque was, which, look, it's the fight business. That happens. It's whoever's better on said night.
Well, and it's MSG. Wonder Boy has history in MSG of winning. So there's that already was going for him.
Yeah, and I mean, he does have that whole hometown crowd behind him because, we heard it the whole fucking fight. So I'm not mad at the fight at all. It was a fantastic fight, but I just guess I saw it a little bit differently because it looked like he picked them apart really well. And it probably could be just that Luque may have had something stuck in his head that night or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, we may never know at that point.
To be honest, I think that that could have been one of the that was one of the better fights on the entire card, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Absolutely.
They did a phenomenal job of living up to all of the hype on that. And I was impressed though, but I'm surprised Wonder Boy won the fight, to be quite honest, and not because he didn't win the fight. He legitimately won the fight.
Oh yeah, no, he absolutely won it. I'm a huge Vincente Luque fan, but he absolutely won that fight.
Yeah, it just blows my mind that Luque didn't show up anywhere near what I thought he was going to show up as, which for me was a letdown because I thought that could have been a much greater fucking more than it was. I mean, and considering fucking Wonder Boy was coming off of a knockout loss to Anthony Pettis, that was a hell of a fucking comeback fight. It really is. I mean, so let's see how he heals up. I don't know that he's going to get stuck at the middle of the road thing there. I think he has. You think he has maybe one more run at title on him? I think one, but he's got to string a couple things together, and he's got to show up because there's been fights where we expected him to do really well, and he just didn't show up and didn't look
right.
So I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not a hot cold fighter. You generically know what you're going to get every fucking
time. He's pretty consistent.
There's been a few times where you looked at him and went, what the fuck happened to you? Did you hurt something during training or something? And whatever the case may be. But
and I think the other part of that as well is what's Woodley doing? Because we've already seen now that Woodley is absolutely kryptonite to Wonder Boy for whatever fucking reason. Woodley's style shuts Wonder Boy down, and he did it twice in a row. And Woodley is at a point now where he's finally taken his fucking lumps. He ate his fucking crow. He cried his little fucking pity party, and he's on his way back, and he's coming back into the division strong. And he's still the number one contender right now. So I think that has a lot to play as well.
That's going to be, if he's going to get a shot at, if Wonder Boy's going to make one more run at the title, that road leads through Woodley. It
absolutely.
has to.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That absolutely has to go back through Woodley.
The only way that doesn't go through Woodley is if he fights the number 2 guy, wins, and then
and Woodley's hurt or something,
or Woodley just gets title shot and loses. That puts him in the next line. That's the only other way I could see that around not going through Woodley. But it's got to go through Woodley for him. And I know they're not going to want to give them a third fight. But that's a little different because it wasn't. Those two were title fights. That wasn't. Well, the one was a draw between them.
Yeah.
And then the other one, well, he got fucking dismantled. But
he got pieced out.
But I mean, so I guess I could see the possibility of a third fight out of them, especially now that it's not a title fight.
That's what I'm saying. Now that there's no belt on the line, I absolutely think that's a trilogy that people would watch.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, the first fight was fucking phenomenal, though.
Fuck, yes, it was.
The fight to a draw.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, even though Woodley stopped him, it came to a draw for a reason.
Yeah,
like, that was close. That was fucking close.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think he has one more legitimate push at a title.
I'll tell you what, I'd rather see Woodley Wonder Boy 3 than Stipe DC 3.
Right there with you on that one.
I think that is way more of an interesting fight, way more of a relevant fight than DC Stipe 3 ever fucking tries to be.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one. And the reason I say he's got one more run at it for Wonder Boy, he's getting older. He's 30,
37.
Or 30,
I think he's 36 or 37.
Yeah, he's like my fucking age.
Yeah.
Which, look, you're not a spring chicken at that age. And with the fight game, there are diminishing returns with age.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are a few exceptions to policies, like if your name is Randy Couture, but then you go and you do a full workout while you're having a heart attack and go to the fucking hospital.
Try and foam roll your fucking heart attack out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, man.
I'm saying. I'm sorry, Wonder Boy, you were not that guy, dude.
No, very few of us are.
Yeah, that's those 1 in a million kind of fucking dudes. And I'm sorry, there's nobody in the fucking UFC right now that is that fucking guy.
No,
not a goddamn one.
Absolutely not. They don't make him like Randy Couture anymore. That dude is legitimately an American fucking pure tank.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I think eventually Luque was going to end up getting a title shot. It's not going to be this coming year like he had probably hoped.
I think he's got a little work to do, but I think he can still get there.
I think within the next 2 years, we'll see him have a title shot, possibly 3. But we'll definitely see it out of him because he's still young in his career.
Oh, yeah. No, he's still green in the UFC. That's what I'm saying. He just came off Ultimate Fighter a couple seasons ago and has only had a couple of fights in the UFC since then. But the work that he has done up until this point, what we have seen out of him thus far, gives great fucking hope, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. His body of work has been fucking fantastic so far.
Yeah. Even in his loss, he still looked fucking great. So I think there's definitely a bright future for this kid as long as he sticks with it and sharpens his rough edges a little bit down. We'll be all right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited to see what future brings for that kid.
Hell yeah. But moving along from there, one of the most anticipated matchups we have seen in a hot minute now, Darren Till versus Kelvin Gastelum. Now, this was a very interesting matchup style-wise. I think more so than a lot of us anticipated once we got into the thick of it. The problem was in getting to the thick of the fight, we had to deal with a just ridiculously gigantic and downplayed eye poke from Kelvin Gastelum. And I've watched this card top to bottom 4 times in the last 5 days. This is still pretty fresh in my mind. I just rewatched the main card last night. The momentum of the fight completely changed with that eye poke. And I understand that it was early on the fight, and it's interesting to hear something like that. But I'm telling you, based on the momentum that both of those men brought coming into that fight, it immediately was altered with that fucking eye poke. I think this is a situation where Kelvin Gastelum assumed that because he had just fought for the interim championship and was on the fast track to the belt prior to this outcoming, that it should have been a much easier fight for him than it actually turned out to be. And I think on the other side of that, Darren Till assumed that because he was going up in weight class, he would have an easier time with this fight than he did as well, because you could see that Calvin didn't really want it that bad. And you could also see Darren Till coasting throughout the fight, thinking that he just had it in the bag really early on for some fucking reason without actually having done enough work, in my opinion, to warrant having it in the bag or thinking that you had it in the bag. I think realistically what this showed to me was that neither one of these guys are real title contenders right now. I understand that Till got the nod from the judges, but I think this is one of those situations that it doesn't happen often, but it's one of those situations, in my opinion, where because the fight went to the judges, it showed me how little both of them really wanted this victory. That both of them felt confident enough in half-assing and in coasting to have pointed this fight to a victory instead of going out where both of them really needed to do, just go out and just fucking prove that you wanted it. And I didn't see that from either one of them in this fight.
Well, I definitely didn't see it from Gastelum, because Gastelum did not look like the fighter he was against Adesanya. Albeit with or without the eye poke, he didn't even look like it at the beginning of the fight prior to the eye poke happening. Because he was a completely different fighter when he fought Adesanya. The other side of this, Till getting eye poked, I don't think that had to do anything with his performance at all. To be honest, at the time of watching it, I really thought both of them were just having a really bad off night because they didn't look like their normal selves. Come to the fact after the fight and listening to Darren Till's post-fight interviews and saying he was thinking about faking a fucking injury to get out of the fight because he was that scared to go in and fight Gastelum because he had seen what he had done against the fucking now champ. That tells me he didn't have his foot on the throttle because he was scared he might get fucking knocked the fuck out and done in with. I really think that had a lot to do with the way that he fought that night. If you were thinking about trying to get out of the fight by faking an injury, right, that's definitely going to play a huge way in the fight.
And your debut at the new fucking weight class. Yeah, I agree.
you know what? Yes, you got the nod for it, but dude, look, neither one of them deserve a title shot next. No, I will agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I think both of them can do better, and we've seen them do better.
Yeah, in both cases, absolutely.
What I think is going to happen is the next fight for the both of them, no matter who it is they're fighting, they're going to have to show that you look. At this point, I'm not going to try to fake an injury to get out of a fight or think about it. And two, I'm going to fight like I want to fight Israel again for Gaslam. That's the way they have to go in with that mentality. Look, I applaud Darren Till for saying what no other fighters will about, hey,
he openly admitted to being legitimately scared, and that you don't hear about. No. I absolutely agree. I'll absolutely fucking tip my hat to him for that.
Because you know what? Look, anybody who goes into a fight and isn't scared is fucking stupid.
Yes.
Period.
Plain and simple, yes.
But he's the first one to actively go out and say it. Yeah, I was fucking scared. He said, I'm not scared to get hit in the face. I'm not scared to get hit with elbows. I got plenty of those from fucking Woodley. He said, I'm not worried about all of that. But he said, I was legitimately scared for this. And you know what? That's a tilt to the hat. But I really think because of that mental fuckery he had going on prior to the fight, that had a lot to do with his performance. I think had he not had that same mentality, he would have shown up a lot differently. And I think that would have been a lot more of a lopsided fight in his favor. Because the way Calvin came in, he did not look like himself at all. And I'm not a big Calvin fan. But he just didn't look right. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy watching his fights because he has a way to manage distance, especially because everybody he fights is fucking taller than him and longer than him. And he does a fantastic job of it. But he didn't look like himself, and neither did Darren Till. And now we know why Darren Till didn't. I don't know why Kelvin was the way he was, though. Look, albeit the eye poke or not, I really don't think that had a whole lot to do with it. Maybe a smidgen. But the way Darren Till just wiped his fucking eye and said, let's go, that tells me that eye poke didn't have a whole lot to do with anything. And it could be just the fighter in him. I'm saying, fuck it, let's do it. And the other part of it could be that it really wasn't that bad to him. Although it did look pretty fucking gnarly on the replays that they showed. Yes, there's whole fucking finger up in the eye socket.
Knuckle deep in the eyeball.
Looking around for fucking loose orbital fractures to see if you should punch him there or not. It was gnarly, but that just tells me he's tough as fucking nails to just wipe it away, not even take he didn't even take a minute. It was like 10, 15 seconds, and bam, let's go. Get right back at it. And so I am hard-pressed to say that eye poke had a lot to do with it. I think most of it was mentalities on both parts because they both didn't look like themselves at all. And because they're two normally very talented and very exciting fighters to watch. For this one, it didn't look anywhere near as their normal excitement. And don't get me wrong, we know what kind of fighters each of them are. We've seen them time and time again when they aren't going up in those big situations. I mean, look, I can't blame Till for getting out of 170. He was hurting his body getting down there, and he even said that. So, look, fucking Gaslam, I don't know what the fuck is going on with that dude. Because he hasn't said anything about it, so there's no way of telling what the fuck was going through his mind other than he failed to perform.
Right. Period. Well, and the other strange side of that is that on Monday, Darren Till was on Ariel Helwani's show talking about how, he was legitimately so afraid before the fight that he was considering faking an injury for it. Excuse me. And then in almost the very next breath said that he's not done at 170. He wants at least 2 more fights down at 170 because he doesn't feel that he finished his business down there.
Yeah.
Did you see him on the scale at 185?
Yeah.
If you watch the weigh-ins for last weekend, he was sunken in at 185.
Oh, and that also brings up the other weight gate for the fucking weigh-ins. But he did look sunken in. That's the other issue I had with that fight.
He looked like a fucking skeleton making 185, and he'd been fighting at 170. He got a fucking title shot almost at 170.
Yep. And that's another one of those cases what we were talking about earlier. We need to make sure we're managing weight better for every fighter. And that's like that other part of the weigh-ins. The fucking Calvin Gastelum weigh-in.
That motherfucker.
Pushing on your coach. Using the towel, not the fucking new hoop of shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying there was some fucking malarkey there, that's for sure.
I think the biggest part about that bothered me because there's multiple videos from multiple angles of Calvin Gastelum weighing in, and you can absolutely see from several different videos that were taken from several different angles by people, not by news organizations or not by fucking, media outlets, by legitimate people who had their fucking cell phones out watching the weigh-ins. Rafael Cordero, for some reason, walks up behind naked Calvin Gastelum and looks over his shoulder at the fucking scale. And then his shoulder kind of dips a little bit as you see Calvin's elbow make contact with the meat of Rafael's shoulder. And then the judges, both the towel guys and the fucking actual judge referee, I don't know what his specific title is, that's reading the weight, stop and then look down. He starts to say 186 and then stops, looks at it again. Everyone looks down and then goes, no, 183. The fuck? No. It's Tailgate 2.0.
Well, the plus side to that, the New York State Athletic Commission is going after that. They didn't. I saw an article on that. I haven't seen what the outcome is yet, but they said they are going to pursue some sort of action against them for that fuckery.
Good. I hope so. Because that's not the first time we've seen that happen.
Look, if you're going to miss weight, miss weight. Be a fucking man about it. Say, hey, I fucked up. I didn't meet I ate too many donuts during training. Right. Whatever the fucking case may be. Yeah. Just take the hit on the fucking chin and call it a fucking day. And, maybe that's part of the other reason why Calvin didn't look so fucking hot. Maybe he had that thought in the mind because
it's still in his head.
They had released that out before the fight even took place. They released it later that afternoon that the New York State Athletic Commission was going to take some sort of punitive action against him. So that might have been weighing on it, had something to do with their fight. I don't fucking know, but the whole weight gate fucking part 2 there.
Right.
It's fucking ridiculous. Look, if you have to go butt-ass naked, hands up in the fucking air, motherfucker, you better be fucking have somebody have you at gunpoint. Don't shoot. Please don't shoot me.
I agree 100%. If you got to go naked, there's no reason your hands should be even anywhere close to your sides. You should have your hands up in the air, elbows above the fucking towel. You have nothing to hold. You have nothing to worry about. You should be literally just standing there as you were fucking made, being weighed. Literally.
And no more fucking towels. Only the hoop of shame.
Hoop of shame. I agree 100%. Guys, girls, I don't give a fuck. If a girl can't get behind a towel and stand there naked, a guy shouldn't be able to either. Make them both use the hoop of shame, hands up in the fucking air. Raise your hands if you're sure, bitches.
Yep, that's exactly it. And why do I say no towel? Go look at weight gate number 1.
The first fucking time, yeah.
Yep, it's fucking ridiculous. That's all I'm saying. I'm glad the New York State Athletic Commission said something about it. I'm mad they didn't look at it right after the fact.
In the moment, yeah.
But, when you're coming in last minute to weigh in, they kind of fucking, they don't have a whole lot of time to look back at it real quick. They need the use of instant replay for fucking weigh-ins for situations like that. Because, man, fucking ridiculous. But, it is what it is. Can't change the fucking what's happened now. Don't be a shitbag. When everybody can see you legitimately, putting your fucking weight on somebody. And the worst part of that is the same fucking day, what does his coaches do? They put out a statement. There is no way that he was leaning on us to take off 2 pounds off the scale. Go fuck right off.
Right. Yeah. Absolute bullshit.
Because the second you have to say that means you're fucking guilty.
Right. Yeah. No shit. You should. The only thing that should have been needed to be said if you were innocent in that situation were go look at the tapes. It was all videoed by multiple angles. Go look at the tapes. But that's not what you said because that's not what fucking happened.
And even if you were trying to lie about it, go look at the fucking tapes.
Right. But from there, we move along to the main event, the baddest motherfucker in the game title that was given out last weekend at Madison Square Garden. One Jorge Gamebred Masvidal versus Nate Diaz. Spoiler alert, the fight was stopped going into the fourth round by the New York State Athletic Commission doctor due to a literal finger-sized cut over Nate Diaz's eye, combined with a child's finger-sized cut underneath Nate Diaz's eye, where it literally had the meat of his eye hanging over his eyeball. Extremely controversial because as soon as the doctor stopped it, the first thing that happened was Nate Diaz walked over across the cage to Jorge Masvidal and shook his hand and said, you know, this isn't how I wanted to end it. You could see in fucking Dan Murgliata as he stopped the fight, he literally waved it off and shook his head no. You could tell by his body language he didn't want to stop the fight. But the doctor, whose job solely is to worry about the health benefit of the fighter, determined that the eye in the condition that it was too much of a liability for Nate Diaz to continue and stop the fight. This, I think, is one of the most controversial stoppages of 2019, and we've had a couple. In the moment, watching the fight live, I was 100% against the stoppage. The fact that Nate was able to walk across the cage and talk to Jorge about it, expressing to the doctor the whole way, he's ready to fight, he's good to fight, he can see, he's good to go. I was 100% in favor of that being a bad stoppage until, much like Dana White, after the fight was over and we got to see Nate Diaz's eye out of the ring. It literally looks like he has a shark bite on the side of his face with the stitches, and that's after the stitches, mind you. 26 of them to put his eyeball back together. And I understand that Nate Diaz gets cut in that eye almost every fight and has been cut in that eye plenty of times and fought through it. But this isn't about how many times you can get cut in your eye and fight through it. This is about this one time where you got your eye split open so fucking bad, the meat of your eyelid was hanging over your eyeball, and a medical doctor said that's too much. That being said, the reason that eye was so fucking split up is because Jorge Masvidal is the baddest motherfucker in the game. He had his laser left hand on fucking point. He had some crisp fucking counter shots. Jorge Masvidal was literally landing a shot on Nate Diaz. Every time they clenched, he landed something off the break. Whether it was a jab, whether it was a short elbow, whether it was a 1-2 as he stepped back, he landed something on every single break when they clenched up. The other thing to note about this fight is much like some other fights we have seen, but even to a stronger degree, Jorge Masvidal was talking to Nate Diaz through the entire fight, whether they were standing, whether they were grappling, whether they were on the ground, whether they were, getting ready to walk towards each other in the beginning of the rounds. Jorge Masvidal talked to Nate Diaz through the whole goddamn fight, and it was fucking spectacular. Now, I think two things stand out to me as going forward from the results of this fight. I think a great fucking battle, and I know that Nate is screaming at the top of his fucking lungs right now, let's run it back, let's run it back. That's the only thing that makes sense, let's run it back. Before we even get into that, I agree. The fight does need to be run back. Not immediately, though, I don't think.
I have to interrupt for just a moment.
Go right ahead.
Nate Diaz did release another statement. He is not going to be seeking that rematch right now. He is walking away from the fight game again.
I kind of anticipated something like that.
He said, I'm going, what did he say? I'm going to do a goddamn tour. In other words, I'm guessing he's just going on fucking vacation or whatever the fuck the case may be. But
right on.
That I did see. That was I just saw that pop up today in one of my news feeds.
I did not catch that, so I absolutely appreciate it. So that will slightly adjust what I think my two takeaways from this here. One, if Nate decides he's not walking away from the fight game, if he wants to stay relevant now that he's been a confirmed needle mover by Dana White, if he wants to stay relevant and take the badass fights, I think a very good next matchup to keep him in the limelight, to keep him relevant, and that won't lose him any clout, even if it goes the same way this Jorge fight went. Nate Diaz versus Vicente Luque. You can't stop either one of them. They're the same weight class. They're both legitimate bad motherfuckers. I think that would be an interesting next match. And that's, of course, if Nate decides he's not going to go on tour and step away from the fight game altogether. But the other side of this that I see, it really depends 100% on how UFC 245 plays out. Because I think this is a split tail here. I think if 245 plays out and Kamaru Usman stays the champion, then I think Jorge gets next title shot, because fuck Colby. And I think that would be the perfect fuck Colby to not only not fight him, but to take the title from the guy that he couldn't just beat, because I believe that Jorge Masvidal could beat either one of those gentlemen. So I think that would be the ultimate fuck you to Colby, to not only not fight him, but to then take the belt from the guy that he couldn't. And I think that would happen. But if hell freezes over and Colby Covington actually wins the belt in 245 next month, I think that Jorge Masvidal should fight Kamaru Usman first. Let Colby defend his belt against someone else, because everybody wants to see Colby and Masvidal fight because of the bullshit or the fallout from fucking ATT. I get that. That's not relevant in the fight world. That's a personal bullshit. That'll sell tickets whenever it gets made. I think in the meanwhile, the real meat and potatoes, as it were, of the division, I think if Colby wins, Jorge fights Usman first, because I think he will piece Usman the fuck up and show what Colby couldn't do. Then, if Colby still has the belt, we can make that matchup so Jorge can take it away from him. But if Colby loses, I think Jorge skips him and Jorge gets the next title shot, just to let Colby sit on the sidelines and understand the levels to this game when he sees what Jorge will do against Usman where he couldn't.
To be quite honest, to go all the way back to the beginning of where all of this started, that was a fucking fantastic showing put on by Jorge Masvidal in this fight.
Yes, the fuck it was.
Brilliantly.
As he so eloquently put it, he was painting a masterpiece.
I do have to tip my cap to Diaz, though, as well. He hung in there through everything. There's shots that would have put any other fucking dude down.
Fuck yeah.
And he got up. He kept fighting. And we even did get to see a Stockton slap, albeit from his back. He did reach up and slap fucking Masvidal. I think my favorite part of all this, while they were talking back and forth during all this, somebody asked Masvidal in the post-fight presser, what were you guys saying to? And he said the right fucking words. It was shop talk. That's it. And he left it at that.
Yep.
Like, as he was eating his pizza and drinking whatever fucking adult beverage.
During it, yeah.
Which was fucking, and asking for more pizza and give that guy a round of applause. Dude, that was one of the best post-fight fucking pressers I've ever seen. That was fucking fantastic. But no, Jorge put on the show. As far as the doctor stoppage, I was upset about it. I'm still upset about it, albeit I've seen the cut. Look, whether it's a fucking shark bite or a fucking little cut, if the fighter says they're still good to go and he can still see out of the eye, which he still could, because it wasn't hanging completely over his eye, blocking his view. It was hanging there.
Not in the cage. It was lumping over. They didn't fall completely over till they got in the back.
Yeah. So, I mean, the cut man was doing a piss poor job, especially in the first round after he got cut, which is what led up to all of this. So I blame a lot of that on the cut man. The one thing at first I giggled about, and then when I thought about it, I was like, that's fucking horrible. We literally got a Mexico-style showing after the fight. And when I say that, I'm talking about what happened to the doctor.
Yeah.
They literally had to close his fucking office because people were calling in with death threats, people showing up to the fucking office. They literally had to close down this guy's fucking practice.
Yep, I agree.
And
that's
all of the other doctors who worked there had to fucking leave as well and cancel appointments because of that. Now, the other side of this, if you are a doctor that chooses to be a fucking doctor for the UFC in whatever state you're in, know that this shit can happen to you.
Right. This is inherent risk that comes with the fucking position that you accepted.
Yes. So, is there a reason for you to bitch about it afterwards? No, there's not. Do I think it was a classless act by a lot of people who did that? Yes. Did I find it funny at first? Yeah, because I'm that kind of person. I laugh at stuff like that. Not a lie. But it was still a fucking ugly thing. It was just like the fucking end of that fight down in Mexico City, throwing shit into the ring. Leave the fucking doctor out of it. Look, he's got a job to do. I respect it. As much as I didn't like the decision, and I'm still against it because I think he could have let it go one more round. He had to save Nate from himself. And I get that. And Nate would have went out on his shield if he would have went out at all, which I highly doubt at that point, because Masvidal hit him with everything but the fucking kitchen sink and wasn't putting him away. So, I mean, but, you know, it is what it is. As far as what I'd like to see next, being at this point, I'm not even going to guess as to when Nate comes back. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. If we're lucky, we'll see him at the end of next year. If we're lucky.
Right.
And I'm saying if, because he's always been the one that turns down fights over and over because, you know what, he doesn't care. The fight game is, he doesn't need it. He's got he's got multiple successful businesses between his gym with his brother, between the CBD company.
Yeah, the Game Up Nutrition shit. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got way more than enough fucking income. He's not worried about income. He only wants fights that interest him. At this point, I don't think the Vicente Luque fight would work out because that wouldn't interest him at all. He'd be like, who the fuck is that guy? He hasn't been around long enough because he only wants to fight people who have been around or have a fucking name.
Right.
The only fights that would possibly make sense to me is the trilogy between him and Conor, because that's going to make a lot of fucking money, and everybody's and their brother will pay to see that.
Yeah.
Of course, a rematch with Masvidal, which we know we're not going to get because fucking Dana said, no, we're not doing it.
Right.
And he said maybe in the future, but we're not going to see it.
Yeah,
not in the foreseeable future, which means no, sorry guys. We let you play and have your fun, but we're done with that now. We're going to do what we want to do again.
Yep.
The only other fights that would make sense for him are something where it's going to be a big money fight. And not because he needs the money, but because those are the kind of fighters he wants to fight, and he wants to fight people who have been around a long time. That's it. Other than that, there's not any other fights out there for him that are going to interest him, so I don't think we're going to see him back in a while. As far as Masvidal is concerned, that dude, let him fight whoever the fuck he wants at this point. You have pick of the fucking litter. In fact, what I would really like to see is no matter which way that title fight goes between Usman and Covington, I hope his next opponent is Covington. Because if Covington gets his ass whipped by Usman or just barely gets beat out and we see him and Masvidal go at it, Masvidal will fucking wreck him. He will wreck Usman too. Shit. Put Masvidal in there up against T-Wood. Let him go. That's another good fucking solid fight right there.
That would be a great matchup as well, just to prove that Jorge deserves that next shot and that Tyron isn't getting back to that gold anytime soon. I think that would be a great matchup as well.
I'm just saying there's a lot of really prospective good fights out there. However, Ray did say he is going to take some time off because he's got some hand injuries as well.
Yep.
He
Pieced
said,
him on Nate, yeah.
He's like, he said he had hand injuries from fucking training camp prior to the fight even happening. So he's going to take his time off. We'll probably see him July.
Yeah, I was thinking mid next year, yeah.
Mid
summertime.
It'll be late second, possibly into the third quarter of the year. But I'm guessing we'll probably see him later, like August, September time frame of next year, just to give him that time, depending on what happens with this whole title playout situation. Because he did say he would step in if one of those two fuckers fell out, but they would have to fucking pull the checkbook out. Yeah. And I can't blame him for that. And the only other thing that makes it a worthwhile note here, he did say after the fight, in the post-fight presser, he's going after belts now. Belts.
Period. Yeah,
period.
Plural.
Like, so when I'm done with this division, I'm going to get another belt. I don't know whether he's going to go up a weight class or if he's going to try to force himself down to 155, which I highly doubt. I'm guessing he's more apt to go to
Yeah, I can't see him shrinking to 155. On the other hand, with the nutritionists and shit that he's got at his disposal, if he could get to 155, look the fuck out.
Oh.
But I think realistically, he's going after fucking Izzy's belt next.
Oh, yeah. And that would be a hell of a fucking war right there.
Fuck yes.
But, you know, the way Izzy's talking, he probably won't be at 185 for long. He's got a couple things finished there, and then he wants to move.
I think he's going to, yeah.
But, you know, it'll be interesting. I think the possibilities for who Masvidal fights next are fucking endless at this point. Because he's going to only take fights that are going to, one, make him money. Because he said it himself. I'm here for fucking money, and I'm here for belts. Yep. That's it. You know what? That's a dangerous man when all you're in there for is money and belts.
Cash and prizes, yeah.
Yeah, when you're looking for cash and prizes. And he also said we'll probably only see about 3 more years out of Masvidal.
Yeah, he's not looking to do this the rest of his life. He understands that he's been doing this for a long fucking time and that there's a fucking date stamp on everybody's foot that says you can't do that anymore.
Oh, yeah.
He's realistic about it.
He's been doing it long before fucking the UFC. You got to go all the way back. Look, as much as they played it in all of those fucking lead-ups to this fight of his backyard brawls, if you have not gone out there and seen them, go watch them. They're all over fucking YouTube. We're talking early 2000s, late 90s.
I was going to say, I have a VHS from the late 90s of the backyard brawls that Kimbo used to put on.
When the UFC was still in its infancy.
Yeah.
And I say that loosely because we're only,
26 years in?
26 years in now. So I say infancy loosely because still technically this is, in a sports terms, this is pretty infant stage here. But I'm saying, like, fucking newborn phase. He was backyard brawling. He was Tank Abbotting before Tank Abbott was Tank Abbott.
Right, yeah. Back when he wasn't Masvidal, he was Ponytail.
Yeah. I'm just saying, go back and watch him. You'll understand how long he's been in it because you'll be able to see where they had to hit the fucking little fucking adjust the picture to make sure it wasn't scribbly, you know, on the VHS.
Were happening, yeah.
You know, we had to tune that shit a little bit.
Yeah, adjust your tracking, folks.
That's right. No, dude's been around, so I understand he said, I got about 3 years. He said he's still got some demons to work out, which is why he's still going to keep fighting. He says it's going to probably take me about 3 years to get the rest of them out. Then he said I'll be a normal human being then. Which I kind of laughed at, dude. At this point, there's no chance in hell you become a normal human being.
No normal human being in that future fight, man. Just a quiet retirement.
The closest I've seen to a normal human being, and it really wasn't that normal, was the fucking cookie commercial that he put up on his fucking Instagram. Because that cookie was
cookies or whatever.
Yeah, that cookie was super necessary.
Yeah, that was entertaining for sure.
Fucking, yeah. The things that you'll do for an extra buck. Can't blame you, dude. Get in there, dude.
Right? Hey, get it while you can get it, man. I don't
What I
fucking
want to
blame
know
him a
is
bit.
how many more fights is he going to be game bred before we get Jorge Street Jesus Masvidal?
Oh no, it's official. Did you miss he officially did a thing. He said game bread is dead. I killed him. I am Street
Oh no,
Jesus
I
now.
saw that, but he said that prior to the 244 fight.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. He's
And
not
that's why I
going
said,
by game bread
and
anymore. Yeah.
they still called him game bred though when they introduced him, which is why I want to know why can't we just go to Jorge Street Jesus Masvidal?
Yeah,
I mean,
I have
everybody's
a
calling
feeling
you Street Jesus. May as well stick with it. It's stuck.
I have a feeling that might have been the last time we heard him announced as game bread. Because he was pretty adamant about game bread is who I used to be, and game bread is a guy who had the most decision losses in UFC history, and he doesn't want to be that guy anymore. So I get it. I get it.
It's a funny thing to watch when that switch flipped because you could tell.
You could absolutely fucking see it's night and day difference.
Guaranteed he gets fighter of the year this year. Fucking guaranteed.
And Ariel Helwani and Chael Sonnen were actually having a very interesting discussion about that exact topic earlier this week. Objectively speaking, it is hard to make an argument of who had the better 2019, Jorge Masvidal or Israel Adesanya. They both went from known but not the level they are now to legitimate superstardom in their own fucking rights. Both of them having a belt at the end of the year.
Well, I guess if you look at it that way, but I had to give it to Jorge purely because of the time he's been around. Look.
Yeah, I could see that.
Izzy is in his infancy as a fighter right now. And yet he's walking around doing huge fucking things. He's hit that superstardom level. Jorge's been around forever. We've been watching him ponytail, no ponytail, clean cut, all the way back to fucking, Pride days for him at one point? Yeah, the dude's been around for a long time. So those of us who have been longtime fight fans, I would lean towards him. However, I can definitely understand the Israel Adesanya fucking fight there on that one. And
he's only been in the UFC for 7 fights and he's the champ now. That's hard to turn your back at.
And you're absolutely right. However, I mean, the only thing that really would tip it in his favor, in my opinion, he has a weight class belt. Although he is not the baddest motherfucker in the game because he don't have that belt.
Right.
So, I mean, it could be a toss-up. I mean, either way.
I think there's good points on either side of that argument.
Yeah, that's a hard one to fucking go after. It really is. Now that you bring that up, because I had totally written him off at that point after just watching fucking Masvidal this year. He's been fucking just on an absolute fucking tear.
Yeah.
Fucking KO'd Till, fucking KO'd Askren, beat the brakes off of Nate. I mean,
not to mention Leon Edwards got that 3-piece Minnesota backstage.
Oh, yep. That right there, fight a year candidate right there just for that. Who else
that
does
fucking
that?
Hands back approach, fucking bang, bang, bang. That was a beautiful flip unto itself.
You know, that might be my favorite thing about the new him because he starts every fight that way.
The hands back shit. Yeah, yep. I love it, man.
And look, the only other thing I will say is he's done one thing better than Israel has done this year. He hasn't had any close fights. Every fight that Gamebred has been in, he has decisively won.
This is true.
Via knockout or doctor stoppage. Israel had a really fucking close fight with Gastelum, who looked like shit this week.
Yes, he did. This is very true.
I'm just saying, when your opponent that you just had a war with looks like shit the following fight, that's kind of a diminished fight for you, in my opinion. But, you know,
I completely agree.
It is what it is. It might have just been a one-off thing, but we'll see.
I was going to say, but that's a tricky proposition in the UFC because if we look at a very similar situation to that, look at Francis Ngannou on his fucking meteoric rise, putting Overeem into fucking orbit, and then Stipe hands him his fucking ass for the first time in his career, and look at Lewis versus Ngannou.
Oh, yeah.
And now look at what Ngannou turned around and did to Kane and JDS since then.
And
So
look
it's
what
not like
Derek's
you
done in
can't
the
come back.
meantime too. I mean,
Yeah.
both of them have done some legitimately good things. I mean, Lewis just had a fucking decent victory here. So
Fuck
I mean,
yes, he did.
they're both of those guys. Although Ngannou's on a whole different level right now, trying to work this whole Fury fight thing. Which,
Fuck
to be
yeah.
honest, I hope that happens, and that they do it in both the ring and in the cage.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I get that a lot of people immediately hear about Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury and just shake their head and completely disregard it because it seems like everybody and their brother is talking about this now. Jorge was talking about fighting Canelo after the fucking fight at 244. Khabib's talking about wanting to fight fucking Mayweather now. Somebody was just talking about, who was it? So Jeremy Stevens was talking about trying to box Paulie Malignaggi next, like in a boxing ring. Like, I get it. Everybody and their brother wants to be that crossover breakout star. McGregor showed that there's money to be made and it can be done, and now everybody wants to do it. I get it. But
you have to be the right fighter for that.
Yeah, from a legitimate fight fan standpoint, I don't want to see every fucking UFC fighter or MMA fighter turn around and go jump in a boxing ring to show that they have hands too. That's not what this is about. That's not why McGregor and Mayweather sold what it did. You have to be that right guy against the right opponent in the right setting with the right build. You can't just force that type of a crossover to happen. And now everybody's trying it, but I think Ngannou versus Fury might be that right one with the right guy with the right scenario, because they're talking about doing a boxing match, a legitimate straight up boxing match with Tyson Fury versus Francis, and an actual full contact regular MMA, or not full contact, I'm sorry, a full MMA rules in the octagon match as well. They want to do both. That, I think, is what McGregor and Mayweather was missing. The return, the reciprocation match. Those two giants would be fucking spectacular to watch in both arenas, I think, really.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I think the only reason Gamebred called out fucking Canelo was because Canelo was fighting the same night, and Gamebred had time to go watch the fight since they stopped it at MSG for the UFC because they knew they couldn't compete. Which, ironically enough, this is something else I did read this week that I thought was funny as hell. Apparently, those people over at DAZN thought it was the greatest fucking thing ever because they said, oh, we got a huge plunge of extra buys. No, you fucking didn't. You're lying through your goddamn teeth. And nobody was buying that just to watch that. I feel bad for those motherfuckers who spent $1,000 to be ringside at the fucking Canelo fight and had to sit there for 3 fucking hours.
Yeah, had to wait for UFC.
It didn't start until 1:15 a.m. Eastern time is when
I was going to say midnight Central, Yeah,
when that fucking fight finally started. At that point, I'd gone to bed. I wasn't even trying to stick around for that bullshit.
Yeah, a lot of fight fans were not. Like, I legitimately was more interested in going back and watching highlights of 244 at that point. I didn't even fucking tune into the Canelo fight at all. I was just going back and watching highlights and talking about it with other people who were still watching.
Canelo is a fantastic fucking boxer.
Yeah, no, I love him, dude. I think he's a bad motherfucker. But comparatively, fuck off.
It's boxing has lost its step to MMA. That's all there is to it.
Largely, yeah, largely.
Don't get me wrong. There are still a few fights out there that could possibly outsell some UFC events, but they're few and far between.
Well, perfect example here. Not to cut you off, I'm sorry. This weekend, we're getting ready to talk about UFC Moscow. One of the least anticipated UFC cards of the year, with the most fluff and bullshit they have given us of any card so far. And I guarantee you there will be more views on this fight than the boxing matches this weekend, because most people don't even realize there are boxing matches this weekend, because the boxing matches this weekend are on the undercard of Logan Paul versus KSI. The YouTubers are having a boxing rematch, and the biggest boxing matches of the rest of this year are on the undercard of the YouTubers boxing. Let that sink in for a second.
You know,
YouTubers created a bigger boxing promotion than professional boxers.
that's a sad, sad fucking thing because neither one of those two fuckers can box.
Don't have that problem in MMA.
No.
You got
And
any number of organizations who would laugh those two out of the fucking way and then put on a better show with no-name people than they're going to put on with two YouTubers and then an undercard filled with legitimate boxing professionals and two professional boxing titles on the line that night.
Yep. And it's a sad thing. That's like this week, there's really only one fight that I really wanted to talk about on this entire Moscow card. That's it. And that's the main event. The rest of them, I give two fucks about. Although I do know there will be Voldemort getting knocked out, but that's besides the point. That fight I just didn't want to talk about at all because of the fact of Voldemort. But
no, it's
the meat and potatoes of the meat and potatoes of your meat and potatoes, which is your meat and potatoes, is the only thing I wanted to talk about today. That's it. The rest of it, I give two fucks about.
This is one of those cards that I legitimately spent the last 4 days debating on if we were going to have a show tonight or not. Because there's that much bullshit and fluff in this. I almost didn't even want to put on a show tonight. But because of the recap stuff for 244 and some of the announcements and then the moment, the opportunity to talk about Mr. Caliocane and the situation with weight cutting, I felt is basically what pushed us over the edge. And using that as a beautiful segue, that is actually going to tie us directly from the recap into the meat and potatoes, as it were, of this particular episode. The main reason we are having this show here, the UFC Fight Night 163 / UFC Fight Night Moscow, Zabit versus Calvin. Now, like we were just saying, this is quite possibly, and I know we've led up to this type of sentiment before, but realistically speaking, this might be the overall worst card the UFC has put forth in 2019. I'm not going to say ever. That's over dramatic and that's unnecessary. Just go back and look at the cards we have seen this year and then look at the card that we're looking forward to this weekend, and you'll understand why it's so difficult for us to actually get excited about this. Why TJ was saying there's one fight. I forced myself to dig through this dumpster fire of a card and managed to coerce myself into coming up with 4 out of, I think, 17 fights that I'm even willing to mention. And I'm not even going to break down all 4. I'm literally just mentioning 2 of them because of the prospect for fireworks that they do present. But we'll start at the very tippy top here. Let me see if I can pull this off smooth enough to make it work here. And then should go boink, and then
You did not beat your time for last week.
no, I also had different shit I had to click to, but still, we're getting there. We're getting there. But literally, the prelims are a laundry list of bullshit. Mixed in with that laundry list of bullshit, there are 2 little potential gem, diamond in the rough possibilities, as it were, here. And that is this one right here and this one right here. The first one being Jessica Rose Clark versus Penny Kianzad. Jessica Rose Clark, we have seen in the UFC putting forth effort, maybe not getting the best of results, but always bringing the fight. Penny actually was on one of the more recent seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. Didn't really get to see a whole terrible lot of her fighter. Got to see, it was one of those situations where you got to see more of her like personal camera time than her fight camera time. So you didn't really get to know much about her as a fighter. You just kind of got more of her personality injected on you, and she could be a little abrasive. She's a little bit of an odd duck. That's also coming from a very Midwestern American boy, and she is a foreign gal with a different complete personality. So that there could be that as well. But I will say, since her Ultimate Fighter showing, I have very much come to respect her fighting a lot more. So this is going to be a very interesting ladies matchup, because even though we've seen Jessica Rose Clark before, she's never really been a big name, a dominant feature in that division. So I think is even though she does have some experience in that, I still kind of view her as more of a prospect than a staple in that division. And the other side of that is that Penny Kinanzad is absolutely still a prospect. I think this is only her 4th fight in the UFC. So she's still very green in terms of UFC. I think this is a good chance to see some ladies put on a show in Moscow, which is not a place that we get a whole lot of great ladies fights from, traditionally speaking. The next fight that I am going to mention, not break down, but mention here, is the very next fight right there. That is Alexander Yakovlev versus Roosevelt Roberts. Now, we have seen Yakovlev a couple times, not anything extremely impressive, a lot of potential. Same thing on the other side, though, with Roosevelt Roberts. He's a very brash, very acquired taste, I think, is a great descriptor for him as an up-and-comer as well. Both of these fights here, prospect battles, in my opinion. All 4 of these fighters do have a lot of potential. They're all 4 of them, very rough around the edges, though. So I think all 4 of those, or all 4 of those people, both of those fights, rather, do have a little bit of potential for fireworks in the middle of this Moscow mayhem, as it could be. The problem being, out of 7 fights on the prelims, those are the only 2 even worth mentioning. And even that is a forced mention. Those could both have just gone completely by the wayside and would be none the worse for wear because of that. So using that momentum, we will bring that into the meat and potatoes of the meat and potatoes segment here, that is the main card. Now, the problem with that is that of the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fights on the main card itself, literally only 2 of them are worth talking about. And even then, we're another one of those situations where we don't need to talk about 2 fights, but we're going to talk about 2 fights. Now, the deal is, because there are only 2 fights that I'm feeling worth mentioning here, these are quite apparently here the co-main and the main event, the meat and the potatoes of the meat and potatoes section of the meat and potatoes chunk in the meat and potatoes of this episode. The issue with that is that before we can get to that meat and potatoes entree here, we have to do a thing where us hardcore guys take a step backseat our armchairs, if you will, and we bring in someone who's not quite as rabid, not quite as foaming at the mouth, boisterous and aggravated like TJ and I quite often do. We slow things down a little bit. We relax. We get our bottle of water and we woo-saw a little bit. We bring down the heartbeat, resting pace back to calm, and we bring in someone a little bit less aggressive compared to TJ and I. We have a little thing that we like to call our casual corner, where we bring in the one, the only, the Miss LUMI Vapes.
Less aggressive?
Comparatively
Less
so. I'm not saying overall. I'm saying comparatively in this situation.
All right. Well, I'll be sitting here with my make-believe shirt until Jorge Masvidal accepts the tickle challenge.
Hashtag accept the tickle fight.
Huh?
Excuse me. Hashtag accept the tickle fight.
Yes. I turned the volume down. For some reason, I thought there'd be an echo until I realized going on a different computer.
Frank, yeah.
And Frank's got it all. I don't know why you bothered to put me in before the co-main event, because I already decided I wasn't going to talk about it. I was intrigued until I saw whom was happening with, and then I was like, why the fuck is this motherfucker popping up everywhere? I don't want to see his fucking nasty little face. Yeah. So I'm skipping him.
Yeah, I understand.
And then I went to the main card, and I got pretty excited because I was like, okay, this will be a little bit better. I can do this, until I realized this is like that reference I was talking about. It's like getting excited for high school football. I'm not going to go ahead and disrespect college football because even in my casualness, I know that college football is a pretty big thing. So I'm going to call this high school football to what I would normally enjoy in fighting. So I was looking up Zabist is what people call him, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's going against Calvin. I started looking up highlight reels. And the only thing I could find for Calvin was some fight of him taking out some guy with a mohawk. I went through 5 videos looking for something more than him fighting against some guy with a mohawk. I don't know how significant that is, but clearly you're not very significant if you only have one fucking highlight reel. And I'm casual. I'm not going to go fucking digging up fights where I expect you to do good. And I was actually a little hopeful because I saw that he has a 50% TKO KO ratio opposed to the 35 from Zabist.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually looking forward to Calvin. I was like, Zabist, I have some opinions on him, but let's see what Calvin has. That was just pure disappointing. So I'm going to talk about Zabist because at least he had a highlight reel. I saw him coming out at first with some footwork. The footwork seemed a little sloppy. I've seen him trip a couple times and kind of just throwing shit, seeing if it sticks. And a couple times he's been caught on it. But a couple of times he's actually landed it. So that was pretty impressive. He likes to pick up people and slam. I have mixed emotions about this because the last time I saw this was to my love, and that was just devastating, and I couldn't handle that. But maybe I'll handle it with Zabist, as long as he's not doing it to my love, which won't happen, clearly.
No risk of that.
Yeah. So, I guess I'm rooting for Zabist.
I can understand that. Not a bad call to make. It's going to be interesting either way.
I hope he gets cleaner with his footwork, because the fact that he does the footwork and does the wrestle thing of picking up people and throwing them down, that's unique. Clean it up, tighten it up, hone it in.
Yeah, it can get a little interesting.
I'll root for him if that's the case. That's casual corner input.
Much appreciated, ma'am.
No problem.
So, with our casual corner under wraps here, that will bring us into the mostly moldy with one tiny little edible bite of the what the fuck did you just bring me dish of potatoes for this evening in our co-main event. That being one Alexander Volkov versus a man who will not be named on my channel because I refuse to give scum like that any type of publicity. I will not say his name. That being said, you can clearly guess that my anticipated outcome from this fight is a resulting knockout win for Alexander Volkov. I anticipate no notable. I can't even words now. I'm getting angry about it. I anticipate no notable performance worth mentioning from said unnamed douchebag who has been confirmed will not have his fucking inhaler in Moscow. USADA approved or not. He can fuck off with that shit. That being said, that will move us right along to the prime cut chuck half cooked thing that is the meat of this episode.
I only have one thing to say. Expelliarmus, and I'm out.
Flick and fuck you. So then, like I was saying, that will bring us to the grizzly chuck steak flank, slightly undercooked thing that we are being given here as the Moscow main event of the evening. Now, I'm going to say a little piece about this fight real quick. But what I do want to make a point to mention here, I understand that we get super critical about fights like this, about cards like this, where we call it a lot of fluff, we call it a lot of bullshit. For the uninitiated, there is a reason for that. If you look at the average card, put all the cards from 2019 in a hat, pick one at random. Take all the fights on that card, put them in a hat. Pick one at random. The average casual will have some knowledge of that fighter for the most part, with a few exceptions. There's almost always somebody making a debut on a card. I get that. Then we have cards like we saw in UFC China that we made the same complaint about. We saw that when we went to Abu Dhabi. We had the same complaint about that. And we're seeing it here in Moscow. And I want to take a second to explain why we complain about shit like this, because we are watching this because this is supposed to be the highest level of competition. And for you to get to the highest level of competition and warrant being put on television or even on pay-per-view in some of these situations, as a fan, I feel you should be able to perform at a level that I would be able to recognize your performance, even if I was not familiar with the sport you were in. I say the same thing about baseball, the same thing about basketball, the same thing about fucking golf. If I'm an average casual person and I see your name and I recognize it, you're probably a fairly well-known person. You've been at it. You're, a legitimate professional. With most casual MMA fans, most cards have in one side or the other of just about every fight someone the average person can identify, with the exception of cards like Abu Dhabi, of cards like China, and now of cards like Moscow. And the reason for that is that these cards, for the vast majority of the bulk of them, are not comprised of UFC caliber fighters waiting to get their shot, UFC fighters making their debut. The vast majority of cards like these three specifically, and many more just like them, are filled with previously amateur, if that, MMA fighters from the local scene who are specifically and only getting the opportunity to fight on this card as a sort of non-explicit quid pro quo to the region for putting on this event, i.e., you let us put on our performance in your city, we will let your local fighters be on the performance and get recognition, as well as, obviously the tourist dollars and the money that they bring in. It's called Fight Week for a reason. They're not there for 24 hours. Obviously, they bring a bit of the show with them. But this is one of those situations that we get, at least I do, fairly upset about. I understand that not every card can be a big card, and I don't want every card to be a big card. I don't want every card to be a pay-per-view. I get that. We need cards in the middle. We need legitimate filler cards to work out the divisions, to break out different fights, to see where people stand. Not everything needs to be a main event on a pay-per-view card. I get that. But at the same time, when you have a card like this where we're looking at, I think, 17 fights, and of those 17, barely 4 of them have a name that a fairly hardcore fan can easily recognize and do legitimate research to look into, the average uninitiated casual, even more casual than our casual, literally would not know any name, if not for maybe Volkov and Zabit. Maybe. That's an extreme maybe. The vast majority of the uninitiated casuals, if you look on social media, have no idea who anyone on this entire card is for their fighting prowess. And that's not a downstab at the guys fighting on the card. That's a downstab at the UFC for so blatantly and obviously filling their card with regional quid pro quo bait that it's insulting to the hardcore fans like myself who look forward to things like this and then only get our hopes dashed by realizing the bullshit that we're been given. That being said, I don't think Zabit versus Calvin Kattar is a terrible fight. I don't think so. It's going to be an interesting match. Stylistically, they're both good fighters and they're both a little unorthodox. Zabit, obviously, more so, like LUMI was mentioning, he's got a very strange footwork style. He's very aggressive with his grappling and his striking, but has incredible submission prowess. Whereas Calvin's a little bit of a grappler with a tendency to lean more towards the striking than the grappling side. But neither one of them are in contention for the belt. Neither one of them are in contention for, big recognition. They're both still fairly middle of the road with not a whole lot of hype behind them for the most part. The Zabit camp is pretty rowdy nowadays, but for the most part, there's not a terrible lot of hubbub being made about either one of these fighters. Realistically speaking, this fight does indeed belong on a fight night card, but even at that, I don't think that this is a main event caliber fight. That's not to say there isn't the potential, because we've seen time and time again, sometimes some of the least interesting looking fights turn out to be the most interesting ones once we get into the octagon, because sometimes when the bell rings, shit goes haywire and you had no fucking way of knowing it was going to go there until it happens. There's always that possibility, and I'm completely honest and open to that. That being said, I don't think this is going to give us that performance that's going to have us saying Sunday, oh my God, did you see Moscow last night? Did you see that Zabit versus Calvin Cater fight last night? I think it's going to be interesting, and I do think Zabit has the better overall toolbox in this situation and will get the victory, but I don't think as a main event, this is even really worth giving as much time as I've already given to it by complaining about it. So I'm going to let TJ give his piece on this.
The only thing I have to say about this fight at all, and I said this was only worth mentioning. It wasn't even a fight I really wanted to talk about, but I have to because it's the main event. Look, in this case, I'm sorry, Calvin Cater doesn't have what it takes to beat Zabit. Look, there's some ruckus in Zabit's fucking corner for a reason. He's had some really fantastic showings as of late. And I think what UFC was doing here, we're just going to throw a piece of meat at Moscow so that way they'll eat and keep on buying pay-per-views, because that's really all this is. And especially now with what's going on in the potato section here, they're getting 2 pieces of meat because at this point, it's just them they're throwing table scraps at Moscow, which, to be honest, if I was Moscow, I'd be a little pissed off.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because this is how are you supposed to sell this to people of, look, we're bringing in a international sporting event that brings some of the best in the world, when the best of the world aren't even, or the semi close to being best of the world, or fuck, the gatekeepers aren't even on this fucking card. That is what it is. I say Zabit takes it. I have a feeling he'll do it inside of 3 rounds.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Casual Corner is back. Oh, wait, I forgot my shirt art. So what are the chances that they do this, so that when they go to these kinds of events, that the other fighters get to go and watch? Maybe not enjoy, but they get to go and enjoy maybe what the culture has to offer, not so much the fight that's going on. Is that why they do this? Is that why they put it full of soup cans?
Twofold. Part, yes, because that's actually a great observation. In pretty much every UFC event, when they aren't competing, the UFC likes to have other UFC members cage side to help do the promotions, so they can go out and do their touristy thing and help, get the press for it. The other thing that we didn't really mention actually has a lot to do with the other 2 cards that I mentioned that are comparatively to this, the China card and the Abu Dhabi card, specifically the China card, in that one of the main reasons we're getting a UFC Moscow card to begin with, much like the same reason we got the UFC Shenzhen China card, is because they're trying to open a UFC Performance Institute there.
And the only other reason that they'll bring in other fighters, meet and greets.
Yes.
That sells tickets.
Publicity shit.
That's
yeah.
what I was thinking, because I remember watching Valentina having a blast in Australia.
Yes, she did. She had a fucking field day.
Oh yeah, and that makes sense because it gets their brand out there. Albeit it's also the fighter's brand that shows up, because look, if you're fucking shaking hands with the commoners, you're going to gain more fan base that way, and then in turn the UFC does as well. So for them it's a win-win, but putting on a shit show like this really doesn't help their cause at all.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, unfortunately not.
I was just maybe hoping that the reason why the Swiss Toaster soup can shit show is too many people wanted to go to Moscow to enjoy Moscow and watch the fights. That is really not anything at all.
Leave it to Dana White to believe that people in another country are willing to invest money into a UFC gigantic performance institute based on watching this.
It's not even that at this point. It's a fucking supermarket is what they have going on here. And it's not a nice supermarket. It's all fucking off-brand.
Yeah, no, it's not a nice supermarket in the least bit. It's that ghetto crack mart where nothing has a brand name.
And everything's expired.
Yeah.
Unless you go to the official store, in which case everything's overpriced.
Right, exactly. And then it's only Reebok branding shit, and it's, yeah.
No fun. Okay.
Yeah. No bueno. Unfortunately.
I'm over it.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. And sad as it is, that's really what we have for this particular episode here, because like we said, this main card, I struggled to force myself to talk about 4 fights. So we are going to go ahead and wrap this up here real quick before we give the rundown. I do want to take a moment to mention we officially now have a Patreon page for the I'm No Joe franchise empire branch out, whatever the fuck you want to call this thing. We officially are Patreon supported now. The link is in the description. If you don't like Patreon, there is a direct PayPal link to support what we are doing here as well. I would appreciate anybody that has anything to support. There are options as low as $1, literally. So we are trying to make this better. We are trying to grow this thing. The options are there to help try and get this thing growing with us. Just wanted to take a moment to mention that. But on our way out of here, I do have to thank our casual corner, Miss LUMI Streams. And if for some reason folks have not completely been filled in on some proper MMA shit talking and they need a little bit more of that ear bashing, how would folks be able to get a hold of you to get that relegated out there?
Wednesday nights, this channel right here, 9:30 Central Time, every week. You can also find me on the Instagrams and just shoot me a message wherever you find me. I'm here every Thursday, Wednesday nights, my channel. I'll be glad to entertain your questions. If I don't have time at the present moment, I will get back to you.
Much appreciated for that, sir. My links, you're here. You found me. I'm also on Instagram. I'm No Joe Podcast. We're not hard to find. We're on Facebook. I'm No Joe Podcast. We're not hard to find. We are now officially, we have an account over on Mixer as well for the time being until I get the structure worked out and the defined details of the catch-up show, the recap show that I'm going to start doing over there. We are just streaming video games over there for right now. So if bad video game streaming is your thing, come check it out. But know that very soon I am working on putting together a specific recap show. So it'll cut a little bit time out of this one here to do over on Mixer Live, the way that we do this one on YouTube Live, mixer.com/themeter-does-things. I am the meter. I do many things all across the internet. I appreciate anybody who supports you. And on that note, if you do support us, if we made you laugh, if we put together an episode here that you appreciated, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when we go live. If we really tickled your fancy, share an episode with a friend, tell somebody about the Patreon, help us grow the goddamn thing. We're trying to make this into a thing here. The opposite side of that coin, if you think we're just a couple of dipshits sitting in front of a camera talking about something we have no fucking knowledge about, give us a thumbs down. I won't dispute it. We clearly earned it. But that is all we have for this evening. So remember, don't let ignorance stop you. You can root for anything, unless that thing is thinking Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Have a great night, folks.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up, they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to a slip, and a kicking from the hip, everybody was